Welcome to the David Pakman Show. It is Tuesday. Lewis is back with us. We will hear all about his big wedding extravaganza and the big speech that he gave. People are just up in arms. The National Speakers Bureau, actually, is having Lewis maybe be the keynote speaker. They were so impressed with the wedding speech that Lewis gave. We'll hear about all of that later. I want to talk about a new study, which, if we interpret it colloquially, if we interpret it in layman's terms, confirms that the United States is not a democracy, but rather an oligarchy. This is a really interesting study from, this is going to appear in the journal Perspectives on Politics in the fall. And it finds, essentially, it doesn't use these terms, I'm using these terms, that the U.S. is not a democracy, but instead an oligarchy. And what are these terms? What do these terms mean? A democracy would be a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. In other words, the will of the people. The will of the people is reflected in the system that, in the system of government, in the laws. An oligarchy is when a small group of people have control of a country, organization, or institution. I've long argued that we have essentially an oligarchy, a plutocracy in this country, where those with money, those with resources, have disproportionately more power, and the laws, judicial, and political systems reflect their desires and priorities far more than the average person. And what does the study say? It says, despite the seemingly strong empirical support in previous studies for theories of majoritarian democracy, our analyses suggest that majorities of the American public actually have little influence over the policies our government adopts. Americans do enjoy many features central to democratic governance, such as regular elections, freedom of speech and association, and a widespread, if still contested, franchise. But, and then they go on to say, it is not true, and that America's claims to being a democratic society are seriously threatened by the findings in this first ever comprehensive scientific study, which shows that the desires of the median voter, just the average voter, are disproportionately under-reflected in the laws that are passed, but the preferences of the elite, the preferences of the rich, are far more likely to eventually become law, to eventually become policy. To put it short, we have a system where the elites and the rich get their way so much more than the average person. This is not shocking, Lewis, but it is interesting that it has been scientifically analyzed and numbers have been put to this.
Right. I think it's funny that people just assume that their elected officials are somehow representing the will of the people that elected them, when we know that's not really the case. I mean, you could just take the corporate tax cuts and breaks they're giving these big companies, and I don't think anybody would agree with that stuff. So,
well,
yes,
that's not true, Lewis. There has been this swath of Tea Partiers and others who are somehow convinced that it makes sense to support policies that help rich people and big corporations and not them, because someday they might benefit from that stuff, or because it's ostensible freedom.
I don't know. I just think it's their spokespeople saying that. You get into the crowd, and I bet it'd be a different story. But of course, you don't have these rich people actually representing the country, but their influence is just overwhelming.
To put it another way, the findings of this study say that the opinion of average citizens on a particular issue or policy are mostly uncorrelated with the probability that the policy will be adopted or that their view will represent the eventual laws that are passed. However, the opinions of the economic elites have a much stronger mathematical correlation with the eventual laws that are passed. This is so important. If we are to have change in this country, and when it comes to inequality, when it comes to the plutocratic state of affairs, we aren't going to necessarily have change if people understand this dynamic that exists. But if people aren't aware of this, we almost definitely won't have change, because why would anyone try to change a system that they think is completely fair? So I think this is really an important study.
It's a very important study, and it's interesting. If you ask the conspiracy theorist who's in control of the country, they'll tell you it's an oligarchy too. But for them, it just might be the Illuminati or the Bilderbergs or something. Maybe not oil execs.
Right. No, it would be a different. The details would certainly be different, I think.